Hi, my friend. I'm
Hi,
really
friend.
happy to have you here.
I know. It just feels like we're having a regular FaceTime chat.
It does, doesn't it? So, for those that don't know who you are, let me just introduce you. My friend Dani here is Dani Hamilton. She's a functional nutritional therapy practitioner and a renowned blood sugar expert specializing in using a unique, holistic approach to optimizing metabolic health. Her journey into this specialized field was fueled by her personal battle with PCOS, hypoglycemia, acne, and weight loss resistance, which she successfully reversed after learning that blood sugar issues and metabolic issues were at the root. After working with clients for several years and helping hundreds reverse their metabolic issues like insulin resistance, there were others who continued to struggle despite doing everything right. Encouraged to dig deeper, Dani turned to nature for answers and discovered the incredible power of light, water, and magnetism to help optimize not only metabolic health, but every single aspect of health. Lit up by the sun's healing powers, she now uses a circadian and quantum approach as a foundation for helping her clients heal. Dani is on a mission to help the world get back to nature to heal their blood sugar, uplevel their energy, and feel great. She's the host of the Top 50 Nutrition podcast, Light Up Your Metabolism. She is also the creator of the Transformative Blood Sugar Mastery Program. And she is one of my very closest, best friends in the whole world. And I love her dearly. And I was just actually at her house down in Austin, and we got to spend almost a whole week together, which was really lovely. Her and her cats. Her and her three cats, whom I adore, and I'm not even a cat person. So there you go, Dan.
Thank you.
But so just to give people some background here, now I had you on the show years ago. We talked lots about insulin resistance, and I'm going to link to that podcast in the show notes so everybody can go back and listen to that first. I really highly recommend doing that so you can get a base for today's show. But recently, you've been really getting into the impact that the sun and the lighting environment that we're now in is having on our blood sugar and also several other health issues in our body and what it's impacting. And you have gotten me super into it. Like I am just like, tell me more, Dad, tell me more. And I've been trying to implement all of these new little practices step by step into my life. And I have seen some really cool things happening, which we'll talk about. But I wanted you to come on the show because I haven't talked about this at all in the 5 years that I've been doing this podcast. And now, thanks to you, I'm seeing just how important this is. And it's like, how have we not been doing this? We've got to be doing this. It's something it seems so simple,
Yeah.
but nobody's doing it because they don't realize the impact it's having.
Yeah.
So I'm really excited to talk to you about this today and to share it
Yeah.
with my audience.
I'm excited too because when I first started learning about light and grounding, I was like, okay, but food is more important, surely our diet and lifestyle are way more important. And it was like, well, I'm not going to spend $130 on grounding shoes. That's crazy because that's not that big of a deal. And now it's like, okay, I wear my grounding shoes every day. Like these little things start to really trickle in. Like I literally have a red light therapy panel on my abdomen as we're speaking because I'm inside. Like I have the window cracked. Like I'm doing all these little things to just mitigate the harms of our modern environment and technology. And we are spending as a society over 90% of our days indoors, and it's having a really, really drastic negative impact on our health. And I'm specifically speaking to the people who feel like they're trying everything, they're doing everything right, and there's things that are are unknowingly sabotaging our efforts. And yes, I know that I feel like the glaring exception for this is like we inevitably lose hormones. And, as you talk about, we need to replace these hormones in menopause. But there's other times, there's other health issues that people are going through, and these sort of lingering symptoms that just they won't go away. And that's really where we need to turn to light and circadian rhythms and all these words that seem confusing, like magnetism and electrons and mitochondria. We need to dive into that world in order to really get this idea of what this foundation should be.
Hmm. Tell the story. I think this is such a powerful story. Just, I want to start with this just so people can really get an idea of the impact that this can have. Now, you've been running Blood Sugar Mastery now for several years, correct?
Yeah, I've run it 20 times. So we're up to
20 times. So
around
we've had
21.
hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people that have gone through Blood Sugar Mastery.
Yeah,
And you
right.
have, I know that you have great success with it.
Yeah.
It's why it's been able to continue on for as long as it has.
Yeah.
Uh, and like I said in that intro, you were seeing with some people that it was just like they were doing everything right, but you had this like there was something missing, and you
Mhm.
really feel like this could be a big piece of that. And you had a client that I would love for you to kind of tell her story about what was happening with her, and she was in your blood sugar mastery program.
Yeah, so we were able to get rid of her insulin resistance. She was able to get off metformin, and her blood sugar was fantastic throughout the day. But every morning she woke up and she had high fasting blood sugar. And we tried all sorts of things, all sorts of fasting protocols, all sorts of liver detoxes, and all the things that I knew to try to help get this fasting blood sugar down. And I really felt inadequate as a practitioner because I just didn't have the tools to help. And then I started learning about light, and I told her, and we'll go into the science of why this
Mm-hmm.
is in a bit, but the result of it is that she started really embracing seeing sunrise. And maybe, that's come across some of your Instagram feeds or something. You start to hear, see sunrise light. So she started going out for sunrise and going to the roof of her building because she lives in a city, and she was getting all that light on her skin and in her eyes. And after 2 weeks, her blood sugar went from a 104, which is above a 5, to a perfect 83. And I mean, that is
Wow.
like absolute
That's
perfection.
insane.
So to have that happen, it's like we were trying honestly for 8 months. Like she stayed in my membership and we were just trying everything we could. And it happened in 2 weeks just by seeing sunrise. So it's really,
Yeah.
really powerful.
Unbelievable.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I have to tell you a story that happened this morning, which was, I just thought this is so fitting for
Serendipitous.
today.
Yes.
Yes, totally. Is my son is going to this water park with his school for the day. And he said, Mom, they said that I have to bring a hat, sunscreen, and sunglasses. And I said, sunglasses? I said, you don't have to, he's 10, everybody. I'm like, you don't need to be bringing sunglasses. He's like, that's what they said. I have to bring sunglasses. I said, well, you can tell them that that is not a good idea and that you want to get some. He's like, why? And I said, because son, you want to get the sunlight in your eyes because it tells your brain a whole bunch of different things and then tells your body what time of day it is. And I said, that creates a whole bunch of incredible processes that are going to happen in your body. And he's like, oh, okay. And I was like, so you tell them your mother said no
No
sunglasses because
sunglasses.
sunglasses aren't healthy. And I was like, go on. And then he's like, yeah, and I'm not wearing sunscreen. I'm like, no, you're not. Go
Yeah.
on. I said, you can bring the hat.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that is so cute. Yeah, he has native ancestry, so he has a higher
Yes.
Fitzpatrick score, and you guys are in Canada. And actually, it wouldn't be a good thing for him to wear sunscreen, most likely, because he's probably not going to burn. He probably doesn't have skin that would burn
No,
in
no.
June in Canada.
Well, since my kids were little, I was just talking about this on an Instagram post about that vitamin D, which we'll talk about. But since they were little, I never put sunscreen on either of my kids. And my daughter's fair skinned. She doesn't have the same father, so she doesn't have native ancestry in her. She's got blonde hair, just like me, but she's even more pasty white. You met her. She's
Mhm.
pasty white skin.
Yeah.
And since they were kids, I never put sunblock on them. I would put sun shirts and a hat if it got to be like,
Mhm.
we're
Too
in the
much.
sun all day.
Mhm.
But I really believe that I helped their skin to build up a resilience with the
Mhm.
sun. And they
Yeah.
had they would get a nice base tan. They would never burn.
It's called a
And it
solar
just,
callus. Yeah, it's a thing.
oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, solar,
Yeah.
okay, tell me, what is solar
Yeah.
callus?
Well, can we dive in
Back it
like,
up.
yeah,
Yeah.
back it up because I don't want to jump to the middle of the day. I like to keep things for people's to organize their thoughts because it's a lot of information. I
Yes.
find it's easiest to go from like, sunrise to sunset and then beyond. But we'll talk about the solar callus. So we've hinted at
And the
certain things that we'll
Fitzpatrick
cover,
thing.
and the
I want you to
Fitzpatrick
explain
story.
that
Yeah,
too.
that's all
Okay.
about the vitamin D, the sunglasses, the sunscreen. We're going to go into that. So
Okay.
don't go outside in the middle of the day with no sunscreen before listening to the rest of the episode. Okay, I'll just say that.
Yeah. Okay, so let's start from the beginning. We're
Okay.
explaining the sun's rays, sorry, and
Yeah.
the difference in them and why they're different from what we're getting exposed to
And so,
indoors.
yeah. So before we even go into that, I think it's important that people understand something that you mentioned earlier about like knowing what time it is. This is a concept that I was like, okay, our body needs to know what time it is. Like, it's not like, ooh, like something fun and exciting in the biohacking space. It's like, okay, our body needs to know what time it is. That's so important. Like it didn't hit me like, wow, that's so cool. But now I understand it. So here's how I like to explain it. Have you ever taken a nap and it was like a long nap and you woke up and you just didn't know where you were? You didn't know what time it was. You just were really confused, right? What's the very first thing you try to do? You try to figure
Figure out
out what time it is, who you are, where you
how
are.
long did I sleep
Yeah, how long?
for? Yeah.
Yeah, you try to orient yourself, right? And so before you can figure it out, your brain is like, "Oh my god, like it's stressful to not know what time it is." And that's why that it is the very first thing that you do, because it's stressful not to know what time it is, because like why do we even need to know what time it is at all? Because we need to know what to do. Like why am I not taking a shower, washing my face, and putting on my pajamas right now? Because it's not time for that. Why am I not decorating for Halloween right now? It's not time for that. It's time to be on this podcast. We have to do certain things at certain times. I wouldn't just get up at 2 a.m. and start vacuuming. That would be ridiculous, right? So, I mean, it's a silly example, but our body, just as much as our conscious mind, needs to know what time it is, because we as humans are better equipped at doing certain things at certain times of the day versus the night. Like if you again woke me up at 2 a.m. and was like, all right, let's get podcasting, would I be as articulate and able to, formulate coherent thoughts? No, I wouldn't. Even if I had a cup of coffee, even if I was, woken up, right? So our bodies as humans are better able to do certain things at certain times. So we're better at problem solving during the day. We're better at hunting for food, digesting and metabolizing food, solving problems, having energy. Our peak body temperature is highest during the day, and then it's actually lowest at night. And we are meant to and better equipped to repair and detoxify and restore our bodies during the evening time, during nighttime. And if you're kind of familiar with what I'm talking about, I'm describing what's known as our circadian rhythm. This idea that that certain times of the day we're just best at doing certain things. And this also regulates the sleep wake cycle, but it really goes well beyond sleeping and waking. Every organ, every cell has a circadian rhythm. I actually read a paper about the liver circadian rhythm, and they mentioned like the scientists were shocked at like how much of a circadian rhythm the liver had. Like they usually don't put the opinions and emotional states of the scientists
Right.
in scientific papers, and I was just like,
They were
correct.
flabbergasted
Yeah.
and just beside themselves.
Right? Like, so it's like, wow, like this circadian rhythm thing is like really something. So how does the body tell time then? So like, how is the body keeping track of time? Because I know that there's not like an actual clock inside my body. So actually humans developed receptors in our eyes and on our skin for light. And this is because we lived outside for all of our human history. We lived outside under the sun. There was really, really bright days and very dark nights. And that helped us to have these syncing of the hormones, the right hormones being released at the right time, telling these certain genes to be released or turned on or off at the right time. And specifically, the color of light, the actual wavelength of light that is we have these receptors for, is blue light, actually sky blue. So sky blue light That wavelength, it's about 420 nanometers, we have receptors for. And when that light is present in the sky, it tells our body based on the intensity of it and the brightness, it tells our body what time it is. So that blue light tells our body what time it is and therefore what to do. It's like the conductor of the orchestra. It's keeping everything on task. It's saying like, okay, violins, you're coming in. Okay, horns, you turn off. Like drums, you're coming in. Like, so that is what this blue light is doing. So in our early human history, this was no problem. This was really great because we had the sun's light and it gradually increased in intensity during the day. And then it would peak around noon and then gradually reduce in intensity until it faded away at night. And then it would be basically pitch black. And the absence of light is also something that triggers our body to do certain things. It's like, oh, this light isn't here anymore. Okay, I'm going to do this and that and this and that. So we needed to know what time it was. Blue light is telling our body what time it is. It basically sets this circadian clock. But now you might be thinking, well, we have light on a lot more than that. And don't we have blue light coming from our devices? Isn't that what these blue blocking glasses are?
Yeah,
So
right.
yes, if you're thinking like, I think we have more lights than just the sun now, isn't that a problem? If this light is telling our body what time it is, you are correct. This is confusing the heck out of our bodies. And I started out by saying that we are inside 90% of the time. So we have artificial light sources or the dimming of the brightness of the sun that's so important for our body happening all the time. So we can already start to see how, like, ooh, my light environment is not anything like my ancestors. And, maybe this is going to be a little bit of a problem. So does that feel like it makes sense so far?
Yes. And then isn't it too like the blue light that we're getting inside? Like people are like, oh, like you said, oh, but this is blue light,
Mm-hmm.
right? And are the skies blue and we're getting that blue light, but
Mm-hmm.
that light has infrared in it,
Yes.
correct?
So,
Like the
mm-hmm.
spectrum.
Right. So some people are like, well, isn't blue bad, but is blue good? And so I like to think of it like this. Nature doesn't make mistakes. Nature is always right. So let's look at what nature does with blue light. Blue light in the sun is never, ever, ever without red and infrared with it. So we call that coupled because they always come together. So every time there's blue light present, there's always red and infrared. And blue light by itself raises cortisol, it raises blood sugar, and it raises insulin. So it's a growth promoting, it's like a stress promoting because we need all those things kind of during the day, so we can solve problems, we can get out of bed, we can go to work, we can, move around, we can catch, an animal to eat. Like we need those things. They are not bad. But when we have them at the wrong time of the day, or we have them without the healing properties of the red and infrared, which we'll get into in just a second, then we're having this sort of uncontrolled growth promoting, like stress promoting, blood sugar promoting light wavelength being on our bodies at these really inappropriate times. So artificial blue light is health deteriorating. Blue light from the sun is health promoting, and it's orienting as well. It's helping us know it's the primary time giver to our body. It's dark inside our skulls. We need that light to tell us what time it is. So first thing in the morning, and I will sort of scatter some tips throughout, but early in the morning, we get this sunrise light. And this sunrise light we already talked about was really healing for my client to improve her fasting blood sugar. So sunrise light, basically the first light that we see in the morning, is going to be really, really high in red and infrared light. You may know those light frequencies. You may have heard of those because of those things called red light therapy panels. These healing wavelengths of light have been harnessed and put into these healing devices that people are using all the time because they're very anti-inflammatory. They're very healing to a lot of surface tissues, so good for restoring collagen, anti-aging, reversing sun damage. They're like a powerful antioxidant, so really, really helpful reducing pain. I mean, all sorts of things. There's so many studies on this light. But we can get that light from the sun, especially early in the morning. So we're getting this light And then another thing that it does, and this is why it's so helpful for blood sugar, is because infrared light makes the mitochondria utilize blood sugar more efficiently, so it lowers our blood sugar. So as we
Wow.
have the increase of the blue coming up when the sun rises, that's the first time blue light is present in our environment, that blue starts to rise really gently. And with it, we have loads of infrared light. So it's raising the cortisol just like a little drip, because it's not like a giant burst of blue. It's like this gentle, gradual blue as the sun is rising, but loads and loads of infrared. So we have a gentle rise of the cortisol and blood sugar, but we have so much infrared that it keeps it at bay. And that is why it's so powerful for healing morning blood sugar, but also just in general, like we want to be eating our breakfast outside in the morning when we have this really good insulin sensitivity. That's when our insulin sensitivity is best. So we will have the best blood sugar responses to our meals. And we'll want to eat outside with that light shining on us. And if you can't, if you happen to have a red light therapy panel like I do, you can shine that on you as well. So getting this sunrise light in our eyes first thing is so powerful to set the circadian rhythm, to tell our body, okay, it's morning. I'm starting to make cortisol. I'm starting to notice that this blue light is increasing in my environment very slowly. And the other thing it does is that it actually stimulates pregnenolone, and that is going to either turn into cortisol or our sex hormones. So a lot of people are very deficient in sex hormones, and maybe we're talking perimenopausal women here that still have some, pregnenolone to turn into these other hormones. But also, this can really, really help bump up those hormones that we're getting and that we have in circulation, sort of prolonging the amount of time maybe we have these hormones, is to get this morning light. So really, really powerful. And I just want to contrast it with something that most people do, which is first thing, look at their phone. First thing, flip on the light. First thing, open the fridge. What are we doing when we do all those three things? We're giving ourselves a giant burst of blue. So we're now going to get a giant cortisol response without that infrared to help the body use up that blood sugar. So now we're setting ourselves up for a big blood sugar spike in the morning. And that's why people get stuck with this dawn phenomenon thing. And plus, we don't want like a big waterfall of cortisol in the morning. We don't want that. We want this nice gradual rise. And that's going to help to, turn off the melatonin and get us a little bit more energized. So that's sunrise. Ideally, we want to look at the sky with naked eyes. So no glasses or contacts, not through a window. One of the things we need to remember about our indoor environment is that there's no such thing as natural light that is inside unless the window's open. So you might say like, oh, there's so much natural light in here, but the windows are designed to block out most of the infrared and almost all of the UV light. So it actually concentrates the blue light again. So we have this super saturated blue indoor light. And that's why I have my window cracked right now, and I have the infrared light on me. So because there's so much blue coming from my screen, the infrared being blocked in my windows, I'm trying to just balance it out a little bit. And that's really, really helpful because we're just so deficient in infrared. They've also taken it out of our light bulbs. Remember when you changed a light bulb when you were a kid? It was hot. Now it's not.
Yeah.
Why is it not hot? Because they took the infrared light out of it. They've made it LED, and now LED lights they have these high peaks of blue and very low red and no infrared. They're making things energy efficient. So infrared, to us, we perceive it as heat. So they're trying to keep the heat out by having the windows and the light bulbs that don't make heat. And it's really, really damaging to us because we need this frequency. Infrared light makes up 49% of the sun's rays. 49%. So almost half of the sun's light is infrared. That's how important it is. It is also available in all sunlight, all times of day, all year round. Anytime the sun is up, there is infrared light. That cannot be said of some of the other frequencies. So infrared is this really, really powerful, important light frequency that we are so deficient in. Saunas can be a really good supplement of the infrared light. Red light therapy panels can also be a good supplement when we have to spend too much time indoors or, in front of a computer under artificial lights inside in the winter. Like, we can supplement with those things, but we can also max out on getting it free right outside your door. All right.
I was pep talking my neighbor the other day about this. Yeah, I'm talking about it just as much as you are now. But I was explaining to her about her daughter's this, like, I think she's like albino, I do believe, if that's the correct term to use. But yeah, like she's got a genetic disorder and she's pure white. I mean, almost translucent. And so we were kind of discussing, like, oh, what would you do in this situation if this, she's never had a tan. She can't, like, I don't know if she's even
I wonder if she
able
can't
to
make
get one.
melanin. I think maybe that's what
Maybe.
albinism is that they don't have any melanin. And
be.
that's a pretty significant issue. We're going to talk about melanin in the next section. So that, yeah.
Okay, good. Yeah.
But I don't know how to help your neighbor. I'm so sorry. I don't know that yet, but
That's okay.
Yeah.
She said, maybe I'll just start out with like 5 minutes of sun exposure directly on her skin and then cover her up with the sunscreen or the clothing or whatever. And like, just kind of see if we can't get any sort of base on this poor little girl. But it was just interesting because I was sharing with her, the importance of getting light and some on your skin too, and how, what that can do for you. And so I just think that we're in this like fear of sun is what we're doing.
Yeah. Well, they're telling us, literally, there's articles out there that are like, put on sunscreen even inside. And it's like fear that there's no amount of healthy sun exposure. I'm like, what did our ancestors do, people? Like, they lived outside, like this, that cannot be true. I do understand that a lot of people have migrated and moved, right? So we have people like me with Swedish heritage, Swedish and Italian heritage, and I moved to Miami, Florida. I live in Austin, Texas now. So that is a mismatch for my, geography. What about people with very dark skin who moved from equatorial regions up to Canada? That is a mismatch. And so we're going to have to compensate and do certain things because most of us aren't living at the latitude we were designed to live at. You actually, with the blonde hair, blue eyes in Canada, potentially some of the best chance, like you're somewhat matched for your region, but sunlight is still important. And just so you know, a lot of people think that all sunlight can give you vitamin D. Like, you go out in the morning and you're getting the sunrise light and you're getting vitamin D. And unfortunately, that's not the case. You can only get vitamin D from UVB light, which we're not up to yet. But UVB light is what gives us vitamin D and can make us tan. So morning sunlight and evening.
I don't know this.
Oh yeah, don't worry, I'll feed.
Okay,
I'll feed you. So morning sunlight and evening sunlight, like during sunset, that light cannot tan you. Think about that as like being in front of that giant infrared therapy panel. That's like what it is. Okay, so as the sun continues to rise off of the horizon, I already mentioned having breakfast right after sunrise, within 30 to 60 minutes of sunrise, ideally, because another time giver to our body is food. Food is the secondary time giver, and we want to take advantage of when we're most insulin sensitive. And what I see a lot of people do is have coffee first, and that's also going to artificially raise our stress hormones. And so if we just have breakfast first and then coffee, or even coffee with breakfast, there are studies to show that it lessens the impact of those stress hormones, which is important for anybody who's managing their stress hormones. To have the
She's
coffee.
winking at me, everyone, as she's saying these things, because she has lived with me here and there. So she knows I drink my coffee first thing in the morning and I don't eat.
Yeah.
I know,
so
it's terrible.
What we want to do. So this was a hard thing for me to break because I was like so excited to wake up and have my coffee. I just like loved having my coffee first thing in the morning and sitting outside with it and whatever. But we are training our body to want that coffee and need that coffee right then. And so when I started learning about this stuff, I'm like, I'm going to switch when I have my coffee and my breakfast. And what I realized was by having my coffee, I suppressed my appetite because caffeine is an appetite suppressant. I suppressed my appetite until like 10:30. And so I wasn't hungry until then. And so I realized I'm like, okay, what I'm going to do is for a couple of weeks, I'm just going to go outside, see the sunrise, and guess what it does? It also starts to turn on your appetite. So after a couple of weeks, you'll notice that you do actually get hungry. Every morning I go outside now where I'm like, oh, it's going to be a hard day to eat. And sure enough, I look at the sky. Within 10 minutes, my appetite just turns on. So I started eating first. I started getting used to it. And then I started having coffee afterwards as my reward for having breakfast. And it's, trust me, the coffee is still amazing. So I eat the breakfast and then I'm like, I feel like I want a little something else. Like maybe I'm not totally full. And I'm like, my coffee. And I get so excited that I get to have it. And it's like, it's the best. So it doesn't impact your hormones, your stress hormones quite as much. And then we're getting to front load our meals when, again, we're most insulin sensitive. And that's going to really help us to not develop insulin resistance or leptin resistance, which also controls weight gain, hormones, fat storage, things like that. So after sunrise light, then we come into this amazing time of day called UVA, the UVA window. So now a type of UV light is predominant in the sky. And this light tells our body to do a bunch of amazing things. So the first thing it does is it will stimulate our body to produce this compound called POMC, and it's like a peptide, and it breaks down into all these amazing things. So some of them are endorphins, which make you feel good. You get that runner's high. We get ACTH, which is going to regulate stress and inflammation, cortisol and androgen production. It also produces alpha, beta, and gamma MSH, which is what stimulates melanin, which is what we talked about. So melanin gives our skin that pigment and acts as a natural sunscreen. But melanin also has amazing other benefits. It naturally controls your appetite. It has neuroprotective properties. It can bind with heavy metals and other toxins to support detoxification. Mm-hmm. And it has antioxidant properties to neutralize harmful free radicals. And this light also produces something called lipotropins, which improves fat burning. And I'm not even done with the benefits. So more benefits are that the molecules in your eyes that capture this UVA light, it transforms certain amino acids to different things. So we get tryptophan converted into serotonin. So we can go from like feeling groggy to feeling happy. We get tyrosine to convert into dopamine and norepinephrine, which can improve motivation and focus and fat burning. And then tyrosine also converts into thyroid hormones, T3 and T4, to support our thyroid and metabolic health. I mean, isn't that amazing? Like morning light will like boost your thyroid. Are you kidding me? Like, how come I didn't learn this sooner? So we talked about waking up, seeing sunrise, having breakfast, then having coffee, and then is a perfect time to go for a morning walk or to do some sort of maybe an outdoor workout. And this is not only going to improve our blood sugar response to the meal because we're just going to be using up the glucose from the meal that we just had, but now we're getting the amazing benefits of the light on our skin. So UVA light. And just so you know, there's an app called Circadian, or you can go to the website circadian.life and you can download their app. I have no affiliation, just a giant fan of theirs. And it will tell you when all these windows of time are in your area. And because it changes all the time unless you really live on the equator. Right. So, my sunrise is going to be at a vastly different time than your sunrise, most likely. And like, when is this UVA window? When is this amazing period of time I want to go outside? You could find out on the Circadian app. All right. So any questions there?
Well, I'm just going to put in that, like, as you're talking about all of this, I'm thinking about our hormones and what the hormones do kind of throughout the year. And I don't know the answer to this. Like, this is just theory on my part, but like, I know that we have melatonin receptors, for instance, on our ovaries. And so now we know also that thyroid is impacted by light. So obviously our ovaries and the production of our hormones will be also affected by light
Mm-hmm.
because it has melatonin receptors. And so when your body is reading that it is wintertime and there's more darkness, which as hunter-gatherers would be the time that would be not advantageous to get pregnant, because there's not a ton of food around. You want to sustain the pregnancy. And so that would trigger certain processes in our body, like down regulating thyroid production. And we know from the research that thyroid a lot of the time does down regulate in the winter.
Mm-hmm.
But I wonder, maybe it doesn't, because we have so much artificial lighting in the environment that we're saying that it is actually daylight more often.
Well,
I
there's
don't
not
know.
UVA in
Right.
indoor environments. So because the windows are blocking UV. So I think that we're
So
getting an
most people's
overabundance of
would
blue.
probably
So
go
I think they
down.
would probably tank.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
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 And so I do think that it is very likely that our, the amount of UVA is present in like all throughout the year in all locations, but not quite as strong and maybe not for as long in certain areas. And then we're just not outside as much in the winter, especially you. Like sometimes you get snowed
Yeah.
in. You can't even open the door, right? Which I live in the South because I can't do that.
I know I gotta move.
Yeah. But yeah, so our thyroid would naturally decline. One of the things I failed to mention, because now you're bringing up darkness and melatonin, is that with how I said this in my presentation, so maybe you remember, but do you remember how much melatonin we make during the day versus at night?
Nope.
So we make 95% of our melatonin during the day.
Yeah. I've
95%.
heard
That's
that.
a
Yeah.
huge percent. I looked that
Yeah.
up, like, and multiple studies and sources were saying that. Like, that is a fact. I was like, Molly, is this true? Our sleep expert friend, she's like, yeah, it's true. That blew my mind. We make 95% of our melatonin during the day because of infrared light. That same light that's still present as we go outside all day long. So we need to go outside and get this light. And you can even get infrared in the shade. It reflects off of leaves, as you told me. So we can get infrared light no matter where we are outside, which is really powerful because it's helping to build melatonin. So all this amazing morning light that we're getting is helping our bodies know, like, okay, we're going to be asleep at this time. Like, we need to start building all this melatonin. And then the 5% of melatonin is made because of darkness, and then also released because of darkness. So alluding to what's
So
to
we
come.
make it, but we don't release it till
Not
night,
uh,
typically.
I'm not 100% sure. No, we do. So one thing I learned on a podcast recently, and this is like, I just heard one pass of this, so it's not perfect in my mind, still a little rusty, but my understanding was that we get releases of melatonin at different times because it's a very powerful antioxidant. So when we work out, we get a release of stress hormones and cortisol, and we also get a release of melatonin when we work out to help clear up some of that reactive oxygen species and all those free radicals that are being created from working out. Isn't that crazy?
Yeah, that is. And then it would also help to bring down the cortisol
It would
from,
probably.
right? Because from exercise,
Yes.
you get this cortisol spike, and melatonin and cortisol are like yin and yang, like they'll
Yes, they
modulate
oppose
each other.
Yes.
And then we
But
also make melatonin in our gut, not just in our brain, which was
we
also
make it
mind-blowing to me.
Yeah, we make melatonin. The one that we're talking about during the day is called subcellular melatonin. So we make it in all of our cells. So
That's very interesting. I love that. I just think that that's like everything, like you said, nothing's by accident.
Yeah,
in our body or nature.
Yeah, nature is it knows what it's doing. And it's like, we're just trying to figure this out and trying to use it to our advantage. Like, I feel like by studying what nature is doing, it just puts everything into context, right? Like, it gives it a context, it gives it a timeline. So it's like, oh, when's the best time to be having my coffee? When is the best time? Karen, if you were giving someone a thyroid medication, when would you tell them to take it?
I do in the morning because thyroid and cortisol have a relationship with each other.
Right, but when is thyroid hormone supposed to peak? In the morning because of the sunlight. When do people take mood medications? In the morning. Well, isn't it funny that if we just went outside, we can get this giant burst of, serotonin and dopamine and these feel good hormones. I'm not saying that for everybody it's a replacement for these things. And I'm not judging anyone who's on medications by any means, but I'm saying that look at the opportunity. Like, it's so exciting to me because I'm like, oh my goodness, these people who are working so dang hard on, they're going to therapy, they're, trying to work out and eat healthy, and yet they're struggling with their mental health. Like, I am going through divorce recently. Actually just is official today. But
Oh,
anyway, unrelated,
okay.
but I was struggling with my mental health for the last
Mm-hmm.
many months. And
Mm-hmm.
the only thing that made me feel good some of the time was being outside, and the juxtaposition, you said, like the yin and yang, like it felt like I was in the darkness and then came into the light, and it was like, oh, like I like there are positive thoughts that are starting to be, flow through my brain again. Not everything feels like hopeless and dark, and it can feel like that, and it can feel so hard, I think, for so many people to also sometimes do the things that are going to make them feel well. Like if someone is depressed, it feels really hard to, I couldn't even wash my dishes. So the thought of like going to the store, thinking about what to eat, making a healthy meal, going to the gym, those things really felt not accessible to me as I
Yeah.
was struggling. And
Yeah.
it did feel totally accessible. Step outside. It
Step
was like,
outside.
what a powerful tool for people who are struggling with their health that feels doable and
Yeah.
is free. So
Yeah,
I
and
just,
there's so much research to back this up. I mean,
mhm.
they say there's less depression if you live closer to nature and you live in a rural area compared to like in within a city. And
Even seeing the
there's
color
so
green.
much to back it up. And isn't
Yeah.
there a warning now on LED lights?
Well, that's the scientists, according to Molly's presentation. There's tons and tons of scientists who are calling for warning labels on light bulbs
Oh,
when
calling
used
for,
at
okay.
night. So we're not quite there. We have to hit UVB. I
Yeah,
promise you
okay.
UVB.
Yeah.
But
And I'll just say too, before we get there, sorry,
no,
because I'll
no,
forget,
go ahead.
we can also, just so everybody knows, you can get infrared through clothing outside
Mhm.
and in the shade. So you can sit in the shade, you'll get it from it'll come off of the green, the plants, it
Mhm.
will rebound off of it, and you can absorb it that way. And it
Mhm.
also penetrates clothing. They've researched this.
Yeah.
So if you're worried about skin damage or whatever, put your long sleeve shirt on. That's what I do. I put like a white long sleeve little bikini thing over top of my bikini when I'm at the beach so that I can still get the good rays and without burning my skin. Okay, so
Okay, perfect. So we're going to modify that just a little bit.
okay,
But
please do.
but that is helpful for infrared. And think about infrared like heat. You go outside, you wear clothes, you still feel that heat inside. Even in my garage, I notice I'm like, why are my cats always in my garage? Like I couldn't figure it out. And I was like, oh my gosh, they're sitting there in the heat. It's infrared light. They're not outside. And I'm like, they're so devoid of infrared. And they're like knowingly, even though they're not in like sunlight, they're getting some of the light of the sun that doesn't show up as visual light for us. They're still getting that. I was like, oh, that's so cute. But
Yeah.
anyway, so UVA light, really amazing. That is when the sun is 10 to 30 degrees off the horizon. And again, we're going to find all this out on the Circadian app. There's another app that you can download, also free. It's called D Minder, D as in Danielle, as in vitamin D. D Minder is going to tell us what the UV index is. And when we say UV index, now we're talking about UVB light. So the UVA light is going to help to start building melanin so we can start to build a little bit of a solar callus, but it doesn't give us vitamin D. The only light that gives us vitamin D is that UVB light, and that is not available all times of year, all year round. But vitamin D
Oh.
is obviously a very, very essential hormone like vitamin that is really important for metabolic health, insulin sensitivity, immune system regulation. The immune system modulates our inflammation. So anyone with struggling with autoimmunity, really, really, really powerful. And anyone who wants to have a good blood sugar response to food, so we don't need to like be on a really strict keto carnivore diet for the rest of our lives, this can really, really help. So UVB light is the most demonized and misunderstood of all the lights. And as I said, when it hits our skin, it's going to synthesize vitamin D as long as we have enough cholesterol. So a lot of people are on cholesterol lowering medications, and this is going to make you unable to produce vitamin D. You'll be vitamin D deficient. You'll become insulin resistant if you are not already. That may be the cause of the high cholesterol to begin with. And so this is something that we want to look at in tandem. We have to look at all these things together. We have to zoom out and not be so afraid of LDL cholesterol, which that's not the point of this presentation, so I won't go into that, but just some things to think about. But there's also like 15 other metabolites of vitamin D. So there's all these other things that are being formed in our skin. We get nitric oxide, which is good for our cardiovascular health. We get lumisterol, which works to produce bile acids, which helps the metabolism, reduces obesity, helps thyroid function. There's tachysterol, which prevents vitamin D toxicity. So all of these things, these are just a couple of things that I'm talking about, but unfortunately, these things cannot be gained from just a supplement. And when we're testing for vitamin D, we're testing for the storage form. We have no idea what the active amount of vitamin D is in our body. So we may be supplementing inappropriately. We also may be throwing off other fat soluble vitamins by just taking all this D. We're probably decreasing our A and K. And so vitamin D supplements, if someone is in a very dire situation and they like really need vitamin D, I'm not going to be like, no, you should really get it from the sun. But for the most part, I'm starting to say like, we are currently in summer in the Northern Hemisphere. Like this is your time to build up those vitamin D stores to carry you through the winter when vitamin D would not have been available in your area specifically. Karen, you live in Canada. There's no vitamin D there. I can, here in Austin, Texas, can synthesize some vitamin D throughout the winter, but it's really cloudy. The clouds impact the amount of UVB that gets through. The clothing blocks UVB. You should see how white my butt is compared to the rest of my body. It's like the color of my shirt. If you're watching this on YouTube. So anyway, the clouds block it. So you can't get as much, but again, winter was the season of darkness. And I think they're starting to study, and this is not fact, this is a thought. I believe they're starting to study how melatonin, which would be upregulated and much more abundant in winter, how that's sort of maybe stepping in to take over potentially some of the functions of vitamin D in the winter. But we build this solar callus, this tan, and some people just have freckles. That's the melanin stores, and then the body is pulling from that all throughout the year. So we want to build this tan that lasts a long time. Magnesium sufficiency is also really important for building vitamin D stores. So you want to make sure you're getting enough magnesium.
We're all magnesium deficient.
We're so deficient. So if you can't and I hear some amazing podcasts about vitamin D, and I want to keep studying this because it's so fascinating to me. But people who struggle to get their vitamin D levels up, often I've heard are people who may have something underlying, so some sort of underlying infection or something like that, where they're like using up all these stores. So that's just something to look into if you're someone who struggles to actually make vitamin D and you're doing it the right way. The other thing is that sunscreen is going to block vitamin D production. So clothing is going to block it, shade is going to block it, and so is sunscreen.
And guess what else that I've just learned about?
What?
Lead toxicity pushes down vitamin D levels in your body for purpose,
Interesting.
because it's something about, this was this super smart guy. I really want to get him on my podcast. Um, he said, so when you just can't get your vitamin D levels up, or they're always low, and you're like, why? And then you're like dosing yourself with all these high doses of vitamin D because that's what your functional practitioner is telling you to do. He's like, no, your body's so smart. Why is your body doing this?
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, if you have a lot of lead, which for someone like myself, I have a ton of lead in my body, it does something to protect your system by lowering that vitamin D. Like, I can't remember exactly what it was. So I'll find it, and I'll maybe link to it in the show notes of this podcast so you guys can read more about the lead and vitamin D interactions.
So the cool thing about what you just said is that by doing all the practices I already talked about, seeing the sunrise, getting the UVA, getting all this sunlight, we're actually structuring the water in our body to form into like a battery. And we're increasing that cellular water, and even grounding does this as well. So we didn't really talk about grounding much, but it's an amazing, amazing thing that pulls electrons into our body. The electrons go down the electron transport chain. They create ATP and cellular water. And this cellular water hydrates us on a cellular level, but also polarizes into a battery into positive and negative. And this negative section is called the exclusion zone. And having a very big exclusion zone around all your cells in your body is really powerful because it excludes things. So it excludes things like toxins and heavy metals. And that's why the idea of melanin sequestering heavy metals, having this strong exclusion zone because of the grounding and the sunlight, this is called our redox potential. So just basically getting this really strong negative charge that helps us to have to energize our cells and to be able to take on free radicals and neutralize the reactive oxygen species and give us all these antioxidants and this sort of resiliency of our cells. But we always say we want to redox before we detox. So you want to build that exclusion zone and make that really strong, and that's going to help to mitigate a lot of these issues with the heavy metals. So I wonder, I don't know, I just see that there's some connections forming. So a couple of other things I want to say about UVB. So one of the things that we want to do before we expose our skin to that midday, strong, powerful sun is we want to see morning light, because we're prepping our skin. It's very anti-inflammatory, very soothing, very healing. And then we get the UVA that's going to build the melanin, which is like sunscreen. And then we start to do slower, like increments in that UVB, because now we've prepped our skin for it. And then we build that solar callus, and then you get out of the sun when it turns pink, when it's like, okay, that's enough. Like, I have not had a sunburn. I've been out in the sun, and like my face will turn like pink. Everyone's like, oh, you look a little burnt. Well, everyone, meaning my mother, will be like, you look a little burnt. And I'm like, it's actually just heat. It's like 97 degrees out right now. Like, it's really hot out.
So humid.
I'm just hot. But my skin is not burned at all. And that is the goal. The goal is to not burn your skin. We want to develop the solar callus, which is a tan. And then we want to do it in this full spectrum way. Another way of preventing sunburn is not wearing sunglasses. Because if we have the sunglasses on, not only are we blocking out these beautiful rays of light that are really bright and important for our circadian rhythm and telling our body what time it is, but the sunglasses are also going to think it's dim in our environment. So it's not going to create the melanin that is needed to protect the skin. So if we think about melanin like this internal sunscreen, we can produce the internal sunscreen, but not if our eyes are unaware that it's very bright out. So if you want to avoid sunburns, you do the morning light, you do increasing amounts in maybe at like a 10 a.m. kind of period of time, and like a 4 p.m. You start, especially the more pale you are. So this is where the Fitzpatrick score comes in. So you can just Google Fitzpatrick score, and someone like you, Karen, you might be maybe like a 2 on the Fitzpatrick score. I'm maybe more closer to a 3, but someone with very, very dark black skin is going to be a 6. So it's a 1-to-6 ratio. Maybe someone from Ireland with like freckles is going to be like a 1, right? And so everyone on this scale can tan. Maybe the only exception is this person who does not literally possess the pigment to tan. Maybe someone with albinism is the only person who can't.
Yeah.
So, but everyone should be able to produce some sort of a tan. Even I have someone in my group right now, and she's very fair. She's so freckly. I'm like, Tori, you got tan. she's like, yeah, I did. And she's like, I'm not getting burnt. I'm like, good. Like, and so some people are like, this is the first time I'm actually getting tan, because they're doing it the way that they should, but not just going out at 12 noon. Like, if you're really pale, do not go out in the middle of the day and just be like, Dani said I need to get tan and get vitamin D. Like, you have to be responsible. You have to do it in this really important, using all these steps. And then finally, after that UVB, we're going to get the sunset light, which is again like a giant red light therapy panel. And what does infrared light do? It mitigates sun damage. It heals. It's an antioxidant. So it's going to undo a lot of the potential damage that the UVB did. And so we can get all the benefits and really, really, really lower the risks. And I think it's important to say here too, that the effects of UVB light, the more time people spend in that light, it reduces the risk of cancer. It boosts the immune system. It reduces the risk of dying from all causes, which is, reducing risk of all cause mortality. As we have reduced our time in the sun there's like a chart from 1935 to like the year 2000, melanoma has gone up. It has been an inverse of that graph. So it's really, really important to know that we are doing ourselves a disservice by avoiding the sun at all costs. And I want to argue that proper sun exposure, full spectrum sun exposure, is what the human being was designed for. It just makes sense, right? We lived outside. We were outside for all the day. And so when we take in the sun in this way, in the full spectrum, that's where we're getting all the different benefits, all the different nutrients, and we're getting so many of those benefits and severely decreasing any sort of risk. Like the benefits of getting sun exposure are so vastly outweigh any small risk for me that I'm all in. And you just so you know, I have a tan face right now. I also have makeup on, which a little too much to be honest. But but you can cover your face. So there is photo aging from the sun. I mean, I use my red light therapy panel in front of my face.
I was going to ask that. Yeah.
So
Like, what about skin damage?
Yeah. Like you can cover your face. Absolutely. And then you can use red light therapy. So I'll get my face for a little bit. And then I have a beach chair and I have a shade on it. So I shade my face. And so I just get the rest of my body. So I'm maximizing the vitamin D, exposed skin. So
do we have to have direct sun exposure to get the D?
Vitamin D? You do. Yes, you do.
Okay.
So what you want to think
Can't
about is you want to think about exposing your skin in gradually increasing lengths of time so that you don't get burned. So if Karen, you were to come here to Austin, Texas, and you were like really pale, let's say it was you're coming from winter or something and you go to Mexico or whatever, you'd want to do maybe like 10 minutes the first day, 10 minutes aside. And then maybe the next day you're going to do like 12 minutes aside. And then the next day it's like 15 to 20 minutes. Like you can build up slowly. You can do it in like couple minutes of increments. And then you'll notice if you do it like that, you won't get burned. So you start to learn your skin. And if you want to err on the side of caution, be like 5 minutes. It's like, okay, I'm out for 5 minutes this side, 5 minutes that side, and then go inside. You take a shower and you're like, okay, I'm fine. So work your way into this slowly and get to know your body, your skin, and the area that you're in. Like, I know that if I were to go outside midday right now, I could be out there easily for 2 hours and not have any issue. And by the end of the summer, I remember like growing up in New York, we didn't use sunscreen. At the end of the summer, you could be out there all day, but this tan is my sunscreen. if I were
Mhm.
to expose, like, let's say I wore a different bathing suit and it kind of like exposed, let's say a little bit more of my butt or something like that, or like somewhere where I have pale skin, that skin would be burned, right? So we've all had that experience maybe where it's like we wore a different bathing suit and this like white piece was showing and then that got bright red, but the other skin around it didn't get burned. It's like, why is that happening? Because the melanin is there as the natural sunscreen to protect you. So we build this so we can then stay out longer and longer to be able to get more vitamin D. The point of the tan is to be able to stay out there longer to get that vitamin D. And I want to reiterate, if you have darker skin, you really, really have to be out there for much longer. If you have darker skin, chances are that you will not burn. So you need to be out there, especially if you're at a mismatch for your latitude. So people with fairer skin moving closer to the equator, although we have to sort of watch for burns, we have it easier to get the vitamin D as opposed to someone who's darker skin moving further away from the equator. That's the harder mismatch. So people with darker skin who are living up in northern or very southern latitudes towards the poles are at a pretty big disservice and very high likelihood of developing like issues like autoimmunity and things like that because of the low vitamin D. So really want to stress that.
Is there a recommended, because we're talking to perimenopausal, menopausal women, and I had a lifetime in the sun. I used to live in Mexico in the winter, so I'd be in it year round, and I would slather. I was the put as much coconut oil as possible on and get out there and get as dark as I possibly could get.
Uh-huh.
And I see the damage done.
Mm-hmm.
Even though I didn't burn much, you're right, it did help protect me from the burn, but I still got a boatload of skin damage. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
you can see it all over my body,
Yeah.
except for my legs. And so,
Can I tell you a
women are being
story?
told just to like block, block,
Yeah.
block. So is there like, that you want to, get an hour if you can a day of like full sun exposure? Is that adequate, or are you thinking like the more the better?
I wouldn't say the more the better, but I would say I recently met someone at a conference that we spoke at down in Florida, and she's a like just such a like-minded soul. She was amazing, and she was into this quantum, circadian stuff as well. And she was really tan, and I'm looking at her arms, and my guess is that she's in her 60s. She told me she was postmenopausal. And I looked at her arms and I was looking at her arms and my brain did like a glitch. And then I looked back at her face and I'm just like, what is happening that my brain is not computing that her arm belongs to her, to this woman's body? She had no age spots or sunspots on her arm. And I was like, "Oh my gosh, your arms don't have any spots on them." And she's like, "They don't." And she's like, "I'm out in the sun all the time," but she's doing the full spectrum. She's really prioritizing that sunrise and sunset light, which is going to mitigate this damage. So I can't emphasize enough the importance of the infrared light after and before this UVB light. So if you always consume it like that, think about that like the anti-aging part of this. So we're going in the sun to get the benefits, to get the vitamin D, to get all these other amazing neurochemicals and hormones and upregulation of all sorts of things. And then to mitigate that damage, we have to do that red light. And
Okay.
so, yeah. So, I mean, again, I'm 38, so I don't know. We'll see in 10 years where I'm at. But I do think that, I would also be measuring your vitamin D levels. And so maybe knowing that we need to eat a cholesterol rich diet like egg yolks and butter and good healthy, red meat and things like that to get the cholesterol to be able to make the vitamin D, to have enough magnesium stores, eating our leafy greens, and maybe supplementation because our soils are so deficient.
Mhm.
Getting rid of any
And
salt.
anti-inflammatory diet. Like I
Mhm.
find so many people will say this to me that they quit burning when they change their diet, like to a
Getting,
paleo-based diet or something that's got
yeah.
less inflammatory foods in it.
Yeah, I often don't say this because I feel like my audience already knows it, but it's definitely bears repeating in case someone doesn't know this, but seed oils. Like you
Mhm.
can't have these high levels of seed oils in your body and then go into the sun. That will oxidize. They're very pro oxidation. So we have to eat stable fats. So you want to think about cooking with fats that are solid at room temperature, like coconut oil, butter, tallow, things like that. You can use some olive oil and avocado oil, but just be careful with those
For
because
roasting.
a
Yeah.
lot of them, yeah, a lot of them are just cut with seed oils and they don't say it. So, I lean more heavily into the fats that are stable at room temperature. And then, a really good single origin type of olive oil from one country is pretty important if you could really find a good olive oil provider. And then I believe Chosen Foods was the best avocado oil. That most of the other ones were sort of mixed with some things. So I don't know 100%, but leaning into these other fats and minimizing some of those would definitely be recommended. So the other thing that's really cool about UVB is that when that light hits our skin, it changes our gut microbiome and it increases gut microbial diversity, which is important for better gut health. We want that diversity. So think about like a beautiful rainforest that has all sorts of diversity versus like a field of tomatoes. That's all tomatoes. Like if you have a little bug or a weed that goes into the rainforest, it's gonna be like, who cares? If it goes into the tomato field, it's going to take out the whole field, right? So we want that diversity. And so the sun can help to do that. And it also increases the gut bugs that break down simple sugars, which is helpful for when these foods are in season. So now we're starting to get into the idea that it is really, really beneficial, especially for our mitochondria, to eat food that is in season. And this is something I haven't nailed. This is something I don't have
It's
100%. I
tough.
feel it's hard. It is really
Yeah.
hard because you go into the grocery store, it's like, well, this is from California, this is from Peru, this is from Mexico, this is from Australia. It's like, is there anything from Texas? Like, I live in Texas. Where's the food from Texas? So, and then, yes, like you're probably thinking, well, what the heck do I eat in Canada in the winter? Well, I mean, some people can their own foods and things like that, but leaning potentially more into like a carnivore ketogenic style eating during a couple of months in the winter when there's hardly anything growing, and then starting to eat those greens and things as they come in. Now this is, I call this like a very advanced concept. So you can just start out like, you don't have to be perfect with this. Don't let it stress you out. I'm trying not to let it stress me out. I'm like, do the best you can. So I'll go
Yeah.
to the store and I'll be like, okay, I can buy these from California or these from Mexico. Which one should I choose? I'm like, I'm going to choose California because chances are it's closer to my latitude. And it's like Mexico is going to be more south, and that's going to be indicating that maybe there's more light than there should be. Because another thing to bring into this conversation is the concept of something called deuterium, which sounds like crazy and scary, but deuterium is just what's called an isotope of hydrogen. So stick with me through the science. I'm going to make it easy to understand. So hydrogen has one proton and one electron. It's the first element on the periodic table. So it's got one proton. That's important. So it's going to go down the electron transport chain, and there's one step where there's a tiny nanomotor. It spins and spins, and it can fit one hydrogen. So the hydrogen goes through, and that helps us to create energy. So deuterium is what's called heavy hydrogen, and it has one proton, but also a neutron. So think about it like having, instead of one basketball, now it has two basketballs. So it's heavy. So it goes into the spinning motor in the electron transport chain and jams it up. So it's kind of jamming up the motors in our mitochondria that make energy. So deuterium essentially kind of, it causes a lot of metabolic damage. It's very common that people with diabetes have very high deuterium levels. And so deuterium is often found in sugar, in natural sugar. So anything that's like sweet potatoes, mangoes, tropical fruit, rice, starches, those foods are very high in deuterium. And it's not that we can't have any deuterium. Deuterium is actually growth promoting. Babies need more deuterium. And deuterium is also found in water, and it's higher in areas closer to the equator and lower closer to the poles. So your tap water is, or your well water, whatever, is going to be pretty deuterium depleted up in Canada, whereas mine here in Texas is going to be much higher. But what helps us deplete deuterium? Infrared light, sweating, and movement. So, and actually cold exposure can also help deplete deuterium a little. But this is why a ketogenic diet is also so helpful for metabolic health, because it gets rid of a lot of these foods that deplete deuterium. So when we're eating foods that are in season, so let's say I went to Costa Rica recently and I was eating the papaya, I was eating the mangoes and, the pineapple. I was also walking down the street sweating my ass off. I was like, deuterium depletion walk. Like
Yeah.
I'm depleting all that deuterium. So it's like I'm taking it in, but also depleting it at the same time. So this is just a concept, another way of understanding why it's so important to eat locally and seasonally, because we want that deuterium to match. We don't want to be overloaded. And so yeah, local seasonal eating as best as you can. Start slow. Doesn't have to be perfect. You're not going to keel over and die if you don't do it one day. You can have cake on your birthday, even if it's in December, but like
Yeah.
just something to think about.
80-20 people, 80-20. Okay, now as we're coming to the end here, let's just finish that, like we're getting into nighttime now. What can
Exactly.
we be doing now to tell our bodies, hey, it's nighttime? Because this
Mhm.
is where I feel like there's like, oh my gosh, we're doing this so wrong in our environment with all the lights.
Totally. So we want to ideally eat our last meal before the sun sets. And I know this is harder in winter months, but again, leaning into fasting, keto, carnivore things in winter months, it kind of makes sense. But we want to eat as early as possible and still feel good. And then once the sun goes down, we want to put our house in like a sunset mode. So we want to at least turn off overhead lights, because we have those receptors in our eyes set up to get this overhead light, because that's where the sun is. So turn off overhead lights as soon as the sun goes down. Then I want you to start brainstorming what sort of smaller lights you might already have in your house. So maybe some night lights, maybe you could turn on the stove light, maybe you have a Himalayan salt lamp, maybe some sort of unscented candle. I recommend only unscented beeswax candles, because candles are pretty toxic. If it's seasonally appropriate and you have a fireplace, light the fire, because fire would have been what we would have lit our environment with in olden days, right? And the days of our ancestors. So it was somewhat bright, it was low to the ground, and it was orange. And so orange light has no blue in it. There's almost no blue in this light. So it didn't disrupt our circadian rhythm. And so we want to think about then potentially, this is the only thing where I'm going to tell you to maybe purchase something, and it's relatively inexpensive. So getting a couple of orange light bulbs, maybe some incandescent bulbs that you might dim if you have like a dimmer switch. Incandescent bulbs are hard to find now. They're being sort of banned. And then if you can get some red light bulbs. The one thing I'll say is that if you do your house all in red and the sun goes down, let's say at 5 p.m. in the winter, you will be sleepy by 6. So that's why I like to have some of the orange Himalayan salt incandescent bulbs in there, because it kind of extends. You could stay a little bit more alert. If you go straight to red, you're going to be so tired. So the orange light, so I have some blue blocking glasses here. So FYI, if you have clear blue blocking glasses, they do not work. They don't work. Don't waste your money. If you have like regular glasses that have it, doesn't work. Yellows are great for during the day for mitigating the lights from screens, from fluorescent lights. I wore these to the gym today because the lighting in there is horrible. So that's why I use the yellow lens for daytime. So then as soon as the sun sets, or before the sun rises, if you have to like get up early and it's winter, fall or something and the sun's not up yet, you want to go with orange blue blocking glasses to mitigate all the blue light, get rid of all the blue light and take away some of the green, but you'll still have some of the green, so you'll still be a little bit more alert. And then about an hour before bed, you want to think about all reds. So the red is going to really be dim. It's going to take away all the blues and greens. It's really going to make you, that felt like I just put on these glasses and I just like felt really calm and tired. So that's really powerful. So we want to think about red light bulbs. I have a red light bulb in my bedroom, but I have orange and red in my living room. So it's a little bit more alerting, where you can stay up a little bit. There's other things to think about, like screens. So on the iPhone, if you have an iPhone, you can set it up to where you click the side button 3 times and it turns the screen red. So you can find that out in settings. If you have an Android phone, you can use the Twilight app. If you have a computer, you can use Iris software, IRIS, or you can use F-Lux, and those turn the screen red in different shades of like amber, which are really helpful. They do also have some TV covers, but again, a lot of people, they're like, one of the things I just want to sort of give you a heads up on is that you don't want to make this so that your family can't see. Everyone will need to see. And if they can't see, or if they bump into something, they're going to be mad at you and then not want to do it. If they have to go out of their way to do something, they're probably not going to do it. So what I have is a lamp that has 2 light bulbs in it, and one of them is white and one of them is red. So it's just easy. Like I would just turn on this red one. I have 2 lamps in my bedroom. One of them has an incandescent bulb. One of them has a red bulb. At night, I just turn on the red one. You want to make it just as easy to turn on the red or the amber lights as it is to turn on a regular light switch. The other thing is you want to make sure that the area is lit up. So I have some like little red sort of motion lights in the bathrooms and things like that. You want to get yourself set up so everyone can see in their space, or else people will be against it. And then if you want to start with just you, at least talk about turning off overhead lights, using blue blocking glasses so you can, maybe your husband is going to be like, hell no, you're not covering the screen with, a filter, but then you have your blue blocking glasses so you can also watch TV with, your partner and, not change everybody else's habits. These blue blocking glasses, there's a study showing that people who wore orange lens blue blockers 2 to 3 hours before bed for just 1 month had statistically significantly lowered fasting blood sugar and HOMA-IR scores, which is a measure of insulin resistance. So basically 1 month of wearing these things, they already reduced significant insulin resistance. So it's huge. Like it's a huge impact. I have a client who's like, oh my God, it's taken me over an hour for years to fall asleep. Every single night, no matter what I did. She wore these day 1, fell asleep within 10 minutes every time.
That's what I've noticed is I usually take a while to fall asleep. And since I've been wearing my orange glasses at nighttime I wear them 2 hours before I go to bed, I'm so tired by the end of it. And I've tested it out where I'm like, yeah, is this really, or is this placebo? So 2 nights ago, I didn't wear them before bed. Couldn't fall asleep very well at all. It was probably an hour and a half before I fell asleep. So last night, put them on, and lo and behold, it was like 10 minutes I was asleep.
Amazing. Well, what this is doing is it's blocking the blue light from creating cortisol in our bodies, and it's allowing the melatonin to get released, because yes, 95% is made during the day, but it gets released when there's darkness. Another thing that's really important is having a pitch black bedroom when you're sleeping to allow this melatonin to be released, to work on all the restorative processes in our bodies to heal and repair. And that is going to be just essential for all sorts of things. So, and we didn't talk about leptin yet, but yeah,
that'll be part 2.
That'll be part 2. So much to say.
I mean, we could have had like 10 podcasts in that 1 hour and some that you just talked. Yeah. Cause there's so much to this. And this is why it's so fascinating. And so we've scratched the surface, everybody. And you are probably the only person that I know of, anyways, you can tell me differently, that's implementing this into your program.
Oh, other people are doing it too. But yeah.
With blood sugar?
Well, there is one person who she just
Right.
found out about this stuff and is starting to do it too. But yeah, like I mean, in the blood sugar world, probably,
A little bit.
one of the
Very little.
very few people are
Very few.
considering this. They might be like, oh, go see sunrise, and but I didn't realize this stuff either. And so it's not taking away anything of what I've normally been teaching. It's giving it context, it's providing framework for timing, and it's really considering how much our environment impacts our metabolic health, which I never considered. I just was like carbs and CGMs, which CGMs are really helpful. I still think we should use those. But it's like, okay, we can eat outside and have a better blood sugar response. We can, eat earlier in the day and have a better blood sugar response. So it's not just what you're eating. It's also where you're eating, when you're eating. And, we know that like you're going to digest your food better when you eat with loved ones and you're sitting and laughing and things like that. So it's not so weird that we could, sit in a different environment. We have this light on our skin that's lowering our blood sugar response to meals. It's like, yeah, I want that.
Yeah, exactly. And
Yep.
little by little, I mean, I think this can be a little bit overwhelming when you first hear it all. I know it was for me, where I was like,
Mhm.
Dani, I need to just start like baby steps here,
Yeah.
because I would go down and stay with you in Florida. And I was like, so far away from what you and Molly were doing that I
Mhm.
was like, how do you guys live like this? Like, we couldn't have lights on in the Airbnb after a certain time of day. And it was like,
But we brought a bunch
they
of lights.
travel. Yeah, you traveled with all these little red little lights that you'd put everywhere in the house. The glasses would come on and I'd be like feeling left out in the corner, like, well, can't I just turn on one light, And but now I've just been like, okay, I just have to start small. And that's what I told myself. I'm like,
Mhm.
you don't have to do this all at once. Just start with one thing. And so I got the orange glasses.
Mhm.
And, like now I'm trying to get outside now that it's in season, is
Mhm.
every morning I'm sitting outside now on my deck and making sure I get that morning sunlight, trying to get outside in the afternoon for a walk. So and I'm not doing it every day.
Mhm.
I'm just like, as much as I can without stressing myself out about it,
Absolutely. Because
because
you
I
don't
don't
want to
want
add
another
more
thing on my
stress.
plate. No, I
Mhm.
don't want something else. Because
Yeah.
something we didn't even get into is, you guys, the impact on our hormones is it's crazy. It's
Mhm.
crazy.
Yeah.
I could like spend years probably researching the circadian rhythm of our hormones and how light affects that.
Yeah.
All of our hormones,
And
right?
what
They
you
all
talked
work
about before, the
synergistically together.
circannual, so that yearly
Yes, and then the
rhythm
yearly,
of the hormones, and then the monthly rhythm of our hormones. So
monthly,
it's like there's
daytime.
a
Yes.
daily, monthly, and yearly rhythm of hormones, seasonal, like all sorts of things. So really
Yeah.
profound. Yeah.
I'll have to do a
But
solo podcast on just hormones and
yeah.
what I
But
can find in the research about that.
But I was thinking about what you said about struggling to put everything together. It's like, okay, that was a lot of information, and you might feel overwhelmed, and like, what time, and what if I work, and what happens if the sun is rising really late, or what if, I'm in the car, like, does that count? Like, everyone has so many questions about this. And then the idea of not having it be overwhelming and doing it step by step, where it doesn't feel like a big sacrifice or like a big giant change that's going to feel too overwhelming. I'm creating a course called It Starts with Light. And the course is it's walking you through step by step how to start implementing all of these strategies, why these things are important. So we go into these different, periods of time of light, so you can really get it. You can conceptualize like, oh, that's why this is so important. And then you start slowly, let's say, inching your wake up time a little bit earlier. It's not like, oh, well, I normally wake up at 9 and the sun's rising.
Sorry.
It's okay. If it's like, oh, I'm waking up at 9 and the sun's rising at 6, like, don't wake up at 6 tomorrow. That your body's going to hate that. This idea of how we can gradually change our habits so it doesn't feel stressful to our body. And yeah, so I'm making that program. So I'm happy
And then you
to.
also have that little handout that people
Mhm.
can um, right? You gave it to me. It was a great little handout with just like the step by step with like the glasses, the different glasses to wear. Remember
I
you
can
sent
send
that to
you
me?
I can send you my blue blockers guide. Yeah, for sure.
Well, no, we'll just send a link. I'm going to put the link,
For
everybody, in
all
the
these
show
things.
notes so
Yeah.
that you can go and you can get that free download, because that was a really good place to start too. Was just this kind of outline of the different glasses and what they're going to do and what you want to start with, et cetera, et cetera.
Perfect.
And then
And then I
you've
have
got the
also
blood sugar mastery course, which you have also put into now all of this information into that. So if
yes.
you're struggling with insulin resistance, type 2 diabetes, or just wanting to get your blood sugar under control, you're
Hmm.
going to learn all of this now in her course, plus all of the original course as well.
Yep.
And then now you've also recently changed your podcast name. So
Yeah.
you went from Unlock the Sugar Shackles to Light Up Your Metabolism. And
Yeah.
so that will also be in the show notes. So you guys can listen to her podcast and continue to learn more about this.
Yeah, I'll have a couple of free things for everybody in there with a couple of important steps, the blue blocking guide, and some of the wait lists. And if you're confused, just reach out.
Sounds good. Okay,
Awesome.
thank you, my
Thanks,
friend.
friend.
I really appreciate all of your knowledge. You are so smart about all this. I'm like, I just soak it up. I'm like, give me more, give me more. I love it so much.
I'm glad you like it.
I think because it resonates.
It
And I
does.
think when other people hear it, there's just something about it that goes, yes. Like I think, and I always tell you about this, but the time I lived in Mexico and I would eat my face off, drink my face off every single day. I was drinking beer from morning till night. Like it was not pretty, but that was the case for months and months and months. I would do that every winter. And I was outside. I would wear bare feet where I lived for 3 months straight. I never put shoes on.
Yep.
My house had no windows or walls. It was like a palapa. And all of my health problems would go away every time. And I would lose weight effortlessly, like drop. And I remember when I first went there, I was 19 and it was the heaviest I'd ever been because I had been partying 19 years old and in the bars and eating like crazy. And I gained so much weight and moved to Mexico, probably ate just as bad, drank more, and the weight literally fell off me. And I remember I'd have no PMS, I'd have no headaches, I'd have no hangovers, compared to Canada, where I would have all of those things and I always have ailments, right? I never had them down there because I was in the sun, just in that natural environment as much as you possibly could be.
That's so funny that you made me think about actually a time in my life. I was born and raised on Long Island, New York, and I always struggled with my weight. And I went to grad school in Miami, Florida, and it was 2008. And I was like, I'm getting a tan. And like being from New York, it's like having a tan is like the best thing you could do. It's like, oh, you're so tan. Like it's like it's like a flex. Like it's a really good thing.
Yeah.
So I was like, oh my God, I can get tan all the time. So I was always, always down by the pool getting a tan. And interestingly, it was the very first time I actually got to like a good weight, where I had always been just a couple of pounds overweight, or like even more than that when I started taking the pill and all that stuff. And you could just see it. Like I got really, really thin. My thinnest I ever was when I was tanning all the time in Miami. And I was still partying. That was when I was also partying my face off. Like it's so interesting. And
Isn't it?
but the melanin and all the stuff from the UVB, it promotes fat burning. And think about like a day at the beach, you're just not as hungry as you are. Like when you can soak up these natural energy sources, like food breaks down to electrons and then goes through the electron transport chain to make ATP, which is energy, and that water that I talked about. So if food breaks down to electrons, there's other places we get electrons: stepping on the ground, UV light, and movement. So we're only supposed to get like a third of our energy from food, but we're getting all of it from food and caffeine. But if we max out on these other energy sources, like get outside and get grounded and get the sun on your skin, it's just a world of difference. It's so powerful to how it starts to regulate your appetite. Like I've had fewer cravings and my appetite feels more under control, even with some of the emotional stuff I'm going through. It's like, it's really, really cool. So
Oh, amazing. And
Yes.
for people that are going to start to implement these things, don't hesitate to reach out to us on Instagram, DM us, put a comment in our posts or whatever, both Danny's or mine. You're Danielle Hamilton Health.com as well as on social media.
Yeah.
You have a huge Instagram. You put so much content out. So you guys will make sure you follow her. But comments, let us know what's happening. If you are implementing these things and what are you finding that's changing, whether it be mental health, physical health, anything, let us know what's happening, because I guarantee you're going to start to notice a change. So
Yeah.
thank you again, my friend, for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me. Love chatting with you.
Okay, bye.